Welcome to Dark Mythology Uncovered, where we journey into the shadows of forgotten worlds. In this episode, we're diving deep into the chilling tales of ancient curses, terrifying creatures that haunted humanity's dreams, and the gods time tried to erase. From whispered legends to forbidden rituals, these dark myths reveal the twisted fears and beliefs that shaped civilizations. Get ready for a spine-tingling exploration that blurs the line between myth and nightmare. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and light a candle, you're going to need it. Let's begin. Irish Geasa. Irish mythology is rich with a tapestry of mystical laws, sacred traditions, and ancient belief systems. Among the most mysterious and compelling of these are Geasa, singular, geis, supernatural taboos or injunctions placed upon individuals, usually heroes or rulers. These taboos, if followed, bring power, honor, and protection. However, if broken, they invariably lead to misfortune, dishonor, and often death. The idea of a geis is both a burden and a blessing, a magical constraint that weaves fate tightly around those it touches. This essay explores the nature, origins, and implications of Geasa in Irish myth, focusing especially on how their violation inevitably leads to death, and why that reflects the worldview of early Irish culture. 1. What is a geis? A geis, pronounced a geis, is a binding magical taboo, oath, or prohibition imposed on an individual. It may also take the form of a command or obligation that must be fulfilled. Geasa are deeply personal and vary from person to person. For example, one warrior might be forbidden from eating dog meat, while another might be compelled to always accept a meal when offered hospitality. The key feature is that the geis is inescapable. Once imposed, it becomes an integral part of the individual's destiny. Geasa can be placed by druids, gods, fairies, or even arise from mysterious, unspoken powers within the land or the cosmos. They often function as a test of honor and identity, ensuring that the individual lives in accordance with certain moral or cosmological laws. Importantly, Geasa are not inherently negative. In fact, many bring strength, immunity to harm, or divine favor when upheld. Only when they are violated, knowingly or unknowingly, do they become fatal. 2. The dual nature, blessing and curse. A geis functions as both a blessing and a curse, depending on how it is treated. It might grant supernatural protection, making a hero invulnerable in battle, but only so long as the geis is not broken. This duality reflects a larger theme in Celtic mythology, where power and danger are often intertwined. This mirrors the deep interconnectedness of honor, fate, and social obligation in early Irish society. The Fillid, poet-seers, and druids who might impose Geasa were not just magicians, they were moral arbiters, guardians of cosmic balance. Breaking a geis didn't just bring personal ruin, it symbolized a disturbance in the order of the world. 3. Origins of the Geasa concept. The origins of Geasa likely stem from Celtic oral tradition and early Irish tribal customs. In a society without a formal legal system as we understand it today, spiritual oaths and taboos acted as tools for reinforcing social order and personal integrity. A geis served as a supernatural contract, guaranteeing that a person would behave in accordance with their role, be it as a king, warrior, or lover. The word geis itself may derive from the Old Irish word geis, meaning prohibition or injunction. It's closely related to other Indo-European terms linked to vows and divine mandates, showing that this idea of sacred obligation was widespread. 4. How Geasa are given. Geasa can be self-imposed, divinely appointed, or bestowed by another person, often during moments of great importance such as birth. A child might be born under a prophecy that includes Geasa. Initiation. A warrior might be given a geis upon taking up arms. Hospitality or curses. Sometimes a geis arises through accepting hospitality or being cursed by a wrong person, especially women or supernatural beings. The imposition of a geis often coincides with liminal moments, births, entrances into manhood, quests, or enthronements, highlighting its role as a transition into a destiny-bound path. 5. Famous examples of fatal Geasa. Cuchulainn, the Hound of Ulster. Cuchulainn is the most famous hero in the Ulster cycle, and he lives under multiple Geasa. 2 are particularly crucial. He must never eat dog meat. He must never refuse hospitality. This creates a tragic dilemma. In one story, an old woman, actually a disguised enemy, offers him a meal of dog meat. Bound by honor to accept hospitality, and equally bound by his geist not to eat dog flesh, he chooses to accept. The act weakens his supernatural strength, setting in motion the events that lead to his death in battle shortly afterward. This story exemplifies the trap-like nature of Gisa. They aren't just about obedience, they're about the limits of free will and the inevitability of fate. Even when heroes try to do what's right, the conflict between their Gisa can render any action fatal. Conair Mór, the Doomed High King. Conair Mór, from the Toghail Bruin da Durga, the destruction of the Durga's hostel, was a king bound by several Gisa, including: he must not let robbers into his land. He must not be out at night after certain festivals. He must not refuse people who seek sanctuary. In a chilling twist, he is forced to violate nearly all of them in a single night. When strangers, who turn out to be robbers, seek refuge, Conair grants them protection. Doing so means letting criminals into his land and breaking several Gisa. He ends up at the Durga's hostel, where he is ambushed and killed. The tale is a masterpiece of tragic inevitability. Every decision he makes is morally defensible, but destiny, working through his Gisa, traps him. His death reflects not personal failure, but a cosmic reckoning. The king is out of harmony with fate. Diarmid Ua Duibni, lover and fugitive. In the Fianna cycle, Diarmid is a lover of grain, the betrothed of Finn mac Cumhaill. After eloping with her, Diarmid is placed under a geist to protect her at all costs. Eventually, Finn offers a seemingly peaceful reconciliation and invites Diarmid to a boar hunt. Diarmid had previously been warned never to fight a certain enchanted boar, as doing so would result in his death. However, honor and obligation push him to participate in the hunt. He is fatally gored, and when Finn delays healing him out of spite, Diarmid dies. Here, the geist functions as a kind of symbolic justice. Diarmid's betrayal of loyalty to Finn is repaid with his entrapment in a fatal situation that tests his new loyalties and leads to his death. 6. Thematic implications of Gisa. Fate and free will. One of the most striking aspects of Gisa is how they limit free will. Irish myth doesn't present heroes as fully autonomous, their lives are shaped by sacred duties and supernatural contracts. Breaking a geis isn't just a mistake, it's an existential breach of one's identity and role in the universe. This reflects a worldview where fate is inescapable and honor must be preserved, even at great personal cost. The hero doesn't die because he is weak or foolish, he dies because fate demands a reckoning. The role of women and the supernatural. Women, especially old women, goddesses, or supernatural figures, often play crucial roles in imposing Gisa or testing whether a hero will break them. This aligns with the Celtic concept of sovereignty goddesses, who bestow kingship and power in exchange for proper behavior and respect. Breaking a geis often coincides with violating the social or moral order, especially in relation to hospitality, honesty, or sacred obligations. Honor, shame, and kingship. For kings and warriors, Gisa serve as ethical compasses. They mark the boundaries of what is acceptable and expected. A king who violates his geis not only dooms himself, but also endangers his realm. His failure is both personal and political. In this sense, Gisa are tools of ritual kingship. Just as the land will thrive under a just ruler, it will suffer if the king breaks his sacred duties. Myths involving Gisa often carry moral or political messages about leadership, justice, and balance. 7. Why does breaking a geis lead to death? Death is the ultimate consequence because the geis is not merely a rule, it is a thread in the fabric of fate. Breaking it severs that thread, unraveling the individual's identity, purpose, and protection. Death, in this context, is not punishment, but cosmic correction. Moreover, the fatality of a broken geis reinforces the seriousness of moral, spiritual, and social contracts in Irish thought. It teaches that no one, no matter how powerful, is above the laws of fate. Heroes die not because they are evil or unworthy, but because they are caught in a system of obligations bigger than themselves. Gisa as mirrors of mythic truth. Gisa are not just curious mythic artifacts, they are deep expressions of the Celtic understanding of destiny, identity, and honor. They reveal a world in which power is always conditional, bound by the unseen laws of the cosmos. Whether granting supernatural gifts or setting the stage for downfall, a Geis makes the hero's journey one of fated trial. In modern terms, Geisa might be seen as symbolic representations of the constraints we all live under: ethical codes, personal values, responsibilities, and the invisible expectations of culture. They remind us that being true to ourselves often involves difficult choices, and that failing to honor who we are can have catastrophic consequences. In the end, the stories of Cu Chulainn, Conair Mór, and D. Armwood Ua Duibni don't just entertain, they warn, inspire, and mystify, offering timeless lessons about the price of breaking sacred vows and the inevitable pull of fate. Kishi, Angolan. From the deep shadows of Angolan folklore emerges a creature that embodies duplicity, danger, and dark seduction, the Kishi. Pronounced Kishi, this demon-like figure has haunted traditional stories for centuries, passing from elder to child in whispered tones around firesides and village gatherings. Strikingly unique and symbolically potent, the Kishi is not a simple monster. It is a chilling metaphor for deception and hidden threat, a two-faced being with the handsome face of a man in front, and the ferocious head of a hyena at the back of its skull. This tale explores the legend of the Kishi, its origins in Angolan oral tradition, its symbolic relevance, and how it still echoes in modern conversations around trust, temptation, and the duality of human nature. The anatomy of the Kishi. The Kishi is most famously known for its bizarre physical form. From the front, it appears human, a charming, attractive young man, often charismatic and disarming in conversation. This face is used to lure, seduce, and gain the trust of unsuspecting victims, particularly women. But the horror lies behind. At the back of the Kishi's head is a hyena's snarling maw, vicious, fanged, and ever hungry. This second face represents the demon's true nature. Once a victim is ensnared by the human facade, the hyena head emerges, tearing into flesh with bestial hunger. In some versions of the myth, the Kishi's hyena half is not merely for consuming flesh, but also serves as a psychic or emotional predator, feasting on fear, insecurity, or spiritual essence. Origins and cultural context. The Kishi is deeply rooted in Bantu-speaking traditions of Central and Southern Africa, with specific associations to Angola's Kimbundu and Umbanda tribes. Angola has a rich and diverse oral storytelling tradition, where myth, moral lesson, and entertainment often intertwine. Hyenas have long held symbolic significance across African cultures. Typically, they are associated with scavenging, deceit, and the spirit world. Their eerie nighttime laughter and scavenging behavior give them an aura of both cowardice and danger, making them natural symbols of hidden threats. By blending the hyena with a human, the Kishi becomes a creature of psychological horror, one that wears beauty and civility as a mask for something feral and uncontainable. The Kishi likely evolved as a cautionary tale in communities, particularly to warn young women about seduction, false charm, and the dangers of strangers. But beyond its use in moral storytelling, the Kishi reflects something deeper, a commentary on the duality in all human beings. The legend in oral tradition. In one traditional Kimbunda tale, a young girl named Lemba is courted by a mysterious stranger. He is beautiful, eloquent, and gentle. He visits her village in secret, always meeting her at dusk and insisting on keeping his distance from her family. Her parents, wary of his secrecy, warn her. But the young man's charm overwhelms her caution. One night, Lemba agrees to follow him into the forest. As they move deeper into the woods, she notices strange behavior, how he never turns his back to her. When she playfully runs behind him and turns him around, she is met with the gaping, blood-stained jaws of a hyena. By then, it's too late. This tale, repeated in variations across Angola and neighboring regions, illustrates both the thrill and terror of temptation. The Kishi is not merely a beast, it is a lesson: what is beautiful may also be deadly. The symbolism of duality. At the heart of the Kishi legend lies a compelling exploration of duality, the coexistence of opposites within a single being. 1. Beauty and horror. The Kishi embodies the most literal form of duplicity, beauty on one side, horror on the other. It seduces with aesthetics, only to destroy with animalistic ferocity. This speaks directly to human experiences where outward appearances mask harmful intentions. In today's terms, one might compare the Kishi to the idea of toxic charm, a charismatic figure who manipulates and deceives. 2. Human and animal. The Kishi is not just a demon but a fusion of man and beast, suggesting that the most dangerous monsters may be the ones who walk, talk, and look like us. It blurs the line between civilization and savagery, reminding listeners that within every person, there may reside hidden instincts, primal urges, or moral corruption. 3. Truth and lies. The myth also functions as a metaphor for the dangers of trusting too easily, especially in situations where someone's words and actions are not aligned. The Kishi teaches vigilance, an awareness that truth and deception often exist side by side. Gender, power, and predation. The Kishi legend is often told in stories where the demon preys on women, making it a myth deeply embedded in discussions of gender, power, and vulnerability. In its original context, it served a protective role in traditional society, urging young women to be cautious of outsiders, to value community wisdom over sweet words from strangers, and to beware of charm without substance. But modern interpretations have expanded the myth's relevance. The Kishi has been reinterpreted in feminist and psychological analyses as a metaphor for emotional abuse, coercion, and toxic masculinity. In this light, the tale is no longer just a warning, it's a powerful symbol of how predators can weaponize beauty, language, and seduction. The Kishi in comparative mythology. Interestingly, the Kishi is not alone in its thematic structure. Across world mythologies, similar figures appear, underscoring universal human fears. In Greek mythology, the siren uses beauty and song to lure sailors to their deaths. In Japanese folklore, the kitsune, fox spirit, can disguise itself as a beautiful woman to manipulate men. In European fairy tales, characters like the wolf in Little Red Riding Hood wear metaphorical disguises to get close to prey. These parallels show that while the Kishi is uniquely Angolan, the fear of deceptive appearances is a global and timeless one. Kishi in modern media and culture. Though not as globally known as vampires or werewolves, the Kishi has found a small but growing presence in modern storytelling. African horror writers and visual artists are revisiting folklore to create fresh, culturally resonant narratives. In contemporary literature, the Kishi is being reimagined in novels, comics, and films, where it often functions both as a literal creature and as a symbol of psychological horror. Angolan authors and creators are increasingly drawing on folklore like the Kishi to reclaim and reinterpret African mythology in a modern context. Outside Angola, the Kishi has begun to appear in broader speculative fiction circles, especially as interest grows in Afrofuturism and African fantasy genres. Psychological interpretations. From a Jungian perspective, the Kishi could be interpreted as a manifestation of the shadow self, the parts of ourselves that we hide from others, and often from ourselves. The beautiful face may represent the persona we show the world, while the hyena is the unacknowledged part of the psyche, our fears, urges, and destructive impulses. In therapeutic terms, the Kishi becomes a way to discuss how people mask their true intentions, or how we ourselves might wear masks to hide pain, insecurity, or darker desires. This gives the myth a broader psychological richness, making it relevant even beyond its original cultural frame. Cultural resilience and the future of the myth. As Angola continues to modernize, urbanize, and globalize, stories like the Kishi risk being forgotten. But there is a powerful countercurrent, a movement to preserve, document, and revalue traditional stories. Cultural preservationists and local scholars are collecting oral histories, recording elders, and compiling regional myths. The Kishi, with its vivid imagery and adaptable symbolism, is ripe for renewal and reinterpretation. Its haunting duality can be applied to modern anxieties, online catfishing, manipulative relationships, corrupt leadership, and more. Moreover, in a time where identity, trust, and authenticity are central concerns in both personal and political life, the Kishi's story remains deeply relevant. Final thoughts. The Kishi is more than a demon. It is a mirror held up to human nature, reflecting beauty and monstrosity, charm and violence, truth and deception. As a creature of Angolan myth, it speaks to local cultural values, community warnings, and social rituals. But as a metaphor, it transcends borders, offering a timeless reminder. Not all that smiles is safe. Not all who charm mean well. And sometimes, the real danger is the one you never see coming. In the end, the Kishi survives not just because of the fear it inspires, but because of the truths it reveals. Ereshkigal. In the vast and intricate mythological tapestry of ancient Mesopotamia, few figures are as enigmatic and potent as Ereshkigal, the queen of the underworld. Governing the land of the dead with an iron will and regal detachment, she stood in stark contrast to her radiant and celebrated sister, Inanna, the goddess of love, war, and fertility. While Inanna basked in the admiration of temples and scribes, Ereshkigal was feared, misunderstood, and largely relegated to the shadows of the Mesopotamian pantheon. Her realm, Irkalla, was a place of no return, a mirror of the Mesopotamian somber views on death, in which even the gods themselves treaded cautiously. This essay explores the myth, power, and perception of Ereshkigal, focusing on her overshadowed status in the shadow of her more prominent sister, and what this dynamic reveals about ancient Mesopotamian values, gender roles, and the duality of divine femininity. The Forgotten Queen. Ereshkigal's name means Lady of the Great Earth, a fitting title for the ruler of the subterranean world. Unlike many deities in the Mesopotamian pantheon who had extensive cult followings and elaborate temples, Ereshkigal had relatively few shrines, and very little in the way of direct worship. This is not necessarily an indicator of her insignificance, rather, it points to a broader cultural discomfort with death and the afterlife in Mesopotamian society. To the Sumerians, Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians, the underworld was not a place of judgment or redemption, as seen in later religious traditions. It was a gloomy, dusty existence, where all souls, regardless of morality, eventually resided. Ereshkigal, as its queen, symbolized not evil or punishment, but the inescapable and impartial force of death itself. Her domain was Kor or Irkalla, a dreary land where spirits drank dust and darkness prevailed. Ereshkigal's rule there was absolute. Even the gods respected her boundaries, understanding that the underworld was sacred in its own right, a domain not to be lightly trespassed. The Descent of Inanna. The most well-known myth involving Ereshkigal is The Descent of Inanna, a powerful narrative that reveals the complex dynamics between the two sisters. In this myth, Inanna, driven by ambition, curiosity, or a desire to expand her domain, decides to descend into the underworld. Some interpretations suggest that she seeks to confront her sister or to usurp her throne. Others see it as a symbolic journey of transformation and death rebirth, often likened to seasonal cycles or initiation rites. Before entering, Inanna prepares meticulously. She dons her 7 sacred garments and adornments, each symbolizing power and divine authority. But as she passes through each of the 7 gates of the underworld, she is stripped of one item at each, until she stands naked before Ereshkigal, powerless and vulnerable. Ereshkigal, not deceived by Inanna's divine status, responds with wrath and justice. She orders her death, and Inanna is hung on a hook, left lifeless. It is only through the intervention of other deities, and the clever plan of her loyal servant Ninshubur, that Inanna is eventually revived and permitted to return to the world of the living. This myth is profound not just for its drama, but for the emotional portrait it paints of Ereshkigal. Unlike Inanna's confident, almost arrogant demeanor, Ereshkigal is depicted as grieving, anguished, and suffering, striking her thighs and moaning like a woman in childbirth. This moment complicates the perception of Ereshkigal as merely a grim ruler. It imbues her with deeply human, even maternal, pain. Symbolism and duality. The myth of the two sisters can be read as an exploration of divine duality. Inanna represents life, sexuality, beauty, and the vibrancy of existence. Ereshkigal embodies death, isolation, mourning, and the afterlife. In this sense, they are not so much rivals as complements, two halves of a cosmic balance. One cannot exist without the other. This dualism is reflected in other mythologies and religions, Persephone and Hades in Greek mythology, Isis and Nephthys in Egyptian lore, or even the contrasting aspects of the Christian Madonna and Mary Magdalene. But in Ereshkigal's case, the balance is more severe, more honest. There is no romanticization of the underworld. Her realm is not a moral playground. It is what it is, stark, final, and inescapable. Interestingly, in some interpretations, Ereshkigal is not just Inanna's sister, but also her dark twin, an archetype present in Jungian psychology and many mythologies around the world. The shadow self, often projected onto a sibling or rival figure, embodies the repressed, feared, or socially unacceptable parts of the individual. For Inanna, the goddess of life and desire, Ereshkigal may represent the inescapable shadow of mortality and sorrow that haunts even the most divine. Overshadowed by light. Despite her power, Ereshkigal has long remained in Inanna's shadow, both literally and figuratively. Inanna, who later became identified with the Akkadian goddess Ishtar, enjoyed widespread adoration. Her temples were grand. Her myths were sensual and dramatic. Her presence dominated the religious and cultural imagination of Mesopotamia. Ereshkigal, on the other hand, was feared, whispered about, and rarely depicted in the vibrant art of the time. Where Inanna danced and made love and waged war, Ereshkigal ruled in silence, her power not less potent, but cloaked in dread. This disparity in treatment may reflect the societal values of the time. Life was to be celebrated. Fertility, war, and love were central to the human experience. Death, while inevitable, was pushed to the margins. It was necessary but not celebrated. And its goddess, though essential, was thus sidelined. This echoes modern experiences too. In contemporary cultures, we often elevate the gods or figures of light, youth, beauty, and vitality, while shunning those associated with decay, aging, or death. Ereshkigal's obscurity is not due to a lack of power, but a lack of comfort with what she represents. A queen without rival. Despite being overshadowed, Ereshkigal holds a unique place in the Mesopotamian pantheon as a sovereign ruler. Few goddesses, indeed, few gods, ruled realms as independently as she did. In the underworld, there was no king beside her. Nergal, a god of war and plague, is sometimes mentioned as her consort, but even in these myths, it is Ereshkigal who invites, commands, or controls. In one version of the Ereshkigal and Nergal myth, the gods send Nergal to the underworld as an emissary. He offends Ereshkigal by refusing to bow, and she seeks revenge. Later, however, they fall in love, or he subdues her, depending on the version, and Nergal becomes her consort. This myth, however, often ends with Nergal returning to the heavens for part of the year, leaving Ereshkigal to rule alone for the rest, again evoking themes of seasonal cycles, isolation, and enduring power. Even in myths where she is seemingly dominated, Ereshkigal's core status as queen remains unshaken. Her realm cannot be conquered. Those who leave do so at her will, or through divine negotiation. Her power is terrifying because it is absolute. Feminine power and pain. Ereshkigal embodies a different kind of feminine power than her sister. Inanna's power is externalized, she wields it through sexuality, warfare, and manipulation. Ereshkigal's power is interior, rooted in endurance, sorrow, and sovereignty over a domain that even the most powerful fear. Her moments of pain in The Descent of Inanna, where she cries out in agony, are not signs of weakness, but expressions of a burdened ruler. In some ways, Ereshkigal represents the often unacknowledged emotional labor of divine and mortal women alike, the carrying of grief, the guarding of thresholds, the enduring of isolation. She is, in this way, an archetype for mourning and rage, both deeply gendered experiences in many cultures. Her myth invites us to consider not only the brilliance of light but also the wisdom of darkness. To understand Ereshkigal is to acknowledge that grief is not weakness, that death is not failure, and that sovereignty can exist in silence. Legacy and modern resonance. Though largely neglected in her time, Ereshkigal has found new life in modern feminist and mythological reinterpretations. Scholars, poets, and spiritual seekers have begun to revisit her story, seeing in her not a villain or shadow, but a fully realized goddess, one who deserves reverence not despite her darkness, but because of it. In psychological terms, Ereshkigal's story speaks to the necessity of descent into one's fears, griefs, and shadows, in order to emerge whole. Inanna's journey fails until she accepts her vulnerability, and it is only through Ereshkigal's raw, unflinching presence that this transformation is made possible. Contemporary writers often use Ereshkigal to challenge patriarchal or surface-level understandings of feminine divinity. She is not here to be beautiful or seductive. She does not exist for others' comfort. She exists to remind us that death is part of the cycle, that power can be quiet, and that pain, when honored, can be divine. Conclusion. Ereshkigal, the queen of the Mesopotamian underworld, stands as a powerful symbol of the unseen, the feared, and the forgotten. Though overshadowed by her sister Inanna's brilliance, her role is no less vital. She governs the threshold all must cross, the darkness from which wisdom often springs. Her myths are not tales of malevolence, but of sovereignty, endurance, and the haunting beauty of shadow. In an age that often chases light and avoids pain, Ereshkigal's story reminds us that descent is not defeat, and that sometimes, the most profound transformations occur not in the heavens, but in the depths of the earth. Thanks for venturing into the shadows with us on Dark Mythology Uncovered. From cursed relics to forgotten gods, these chilling legends still echo through time, reminding us that fear is as old as humanity itself. If you enjoyed this descent into darkness, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more twisted tales from the myths the world tried to forget. Got a legend you'd like us to explore next? Drop it in the comments. Until then, keep your candles lit and your eyes open. Darkness is never far behind. See you soon.